This presentation illustrates the approach to be taken in special stake or district welfare training meetings in 1992. Those participating in the meeting include the stake presidency, stake relief society presidency, bishops, and ward relief society presidents. Basic welfare principles will be reviewed, and the approved guidelines for administering welfare assistance will be outlined during the discussion of a real-life situation.
From your discussion, what basic welfare principles must we keep in mind as we attempt to help others to help themselves?
Well, President, one would be the principle of work. We all have to work in order to provide for ourselves through our own labors.
Good morning, Mike.
Good morning.
I have a few messages here.
Okay.
Work is central to the welfare plan and to the well-being of all of God's children. Bishop Simmons?
I was just thinking that work is related to self-reliance. We should do all we can for ourselves before we call on others for help.
Thank you, Bishop. And what else does self-reliance include?
We are counseled to stay out of debt and live within our means.
To conserve our resources and avoid waste.
Anything else?
Members should live providently and put aside a year's supply of food, clothing, and other things that might be needed in times of adversity.
Great. That's all part of provident living and becoming self-reliant. Now, are there any other basic principles?
Well, President, the scriptures give repeated emphasis to the importance of caring for the needy.
You brought me something warm. Sure, yes.
The Savior spent much of his ministry caring for the poor and the needy, and commands us as his disciples to do the same. What specific means has the Lord established to care for the poor and the needy?
Fast offerings. In fact, fast offerings are as important to the givers as they are to the receivers.
Bishop Waite, what can bishops do to help increase opportunities for members to give fast offerings?
A bishop should see that members are taught to fast monthly and make a generous offering. He should also make sure every home is contacted each month, using Aaronic priesthood holders where possible. I also think it's very important for the bishop to review fast offering contribution during tithing settlement and testify to the importance of sharing with those who are less fortunate.
And if thou draw out to thy soul to the hungry, and satisfy the afflicted soul, then shall thy light rise in obscurity.
In addition to the scriptures, each of you should study the Leader's Guide to Welfare and the Caring for the Needy video and study guide. The Leader's Guide explains the Lord's storehouse, and the bishop's duty as keeper of the storehouse. It defines the scope of local welfare activities and outlines members' responsibilities in receiving assistance and much more. If you have any questions on providing for the needy in the Lord's way, you'll find many of the answers right here.
In summary, the basic welfare principles are work, self-reliance, and caring for the needy.
Now, in our next phase of training, we're going to be dealing with a real-life situation. So we can practice the principles and guidelines for administering church welfare. Now, I recognize that we don't live in an ideal world, and people don't always do what they should. Now, there's no single right or wrong approach to the situation that's described here. In fact, there may be several solutions to the problem. But let's just give it our best thinking. Now, if you'd all follow along, Mike and Sharon Bradley are a young couple in their 30s with 3 children. Both have positions in the ward and attend regularly. Mike works as a promotional director for a local radio station. He's on a salary and makes a moderate income. He works hard and feels that he's laying a foundation for a successful career. Besides her duties in the home, Sharon is an occasional substitute teacher and tends children to supplement the family income. The couple are buying their own home. They have 2 cars, an older model station wagon, which is paid for, and which Sharon uses to drive to the daycare center and to her teaching assignments all over the city. Their other car is a 3-year-old sedan that Mike drives to work. They have made payments on this car for 3 years and have 1 year of payments left.
Come here for a second.
The two have been reasonably united in their spending habits, but have often spent more than they have earned.
Does not have any of these 3 checks written.
Sure it does, yeah. Wrote them down.
No, you didn't write them down because I already checked and they're not in there.
As their debts have increased, they have not been able to afford necessities, and the constant juggling of financial obligations has placed stress on their marriage. They have now missed 3 car payments and have just been notified that unless they make a payment immediately, their car will be repossessed.
Hi. What's this?
They have no savings. Both have borrowed from their families and are trying to repay the loans.
Do we have any money we can send them?
After much discussion with Sharon, Mike calls and schedules an appointment with the bishop.
Hi, Bishop. Mike Bradley.
Well, what ideas do you have on how we might help Mike and Sharon get out of their difficulties?
Of course, one option would be to make back payments on the car and to help the family through this crisis, and then to work with them to see that they live within their means in the future.
Oh, so you'd use fast offering funds to help them out of their difficulties?
Going back to the principles we've talked about, it seems to me that if the bishop comes immediately to the rescue, he's ignoring the principle of self-reliance.
That's right.
And the Bradleys may have the same problem again. I think the most pressing need is to help the family learn how to prevent this kind of problem.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Are you saying don't help with the payments and just let them suffer the consequences?
Well, no.
Isn't there a way we can help save their investment in the car and still learn to be more careful with their money?
Maybe, but this family's financial problems aren't limited to the car. This family has some tough choices to make.
Well, how can the bishop help this family to become more self-reliant?
Well, before we can help the Bradleys make wise decisions, we need to gather as much information about the family's needs as possible.
And how do we get that information?
One way is to use the needs and resources analysis form.
Okay, and how does it help?
It'll help us to find out what the family has done for themselves and what resources are available to them and what other family members can do to help.
I haven't gone back to work full time or anything.
Good if we...
And after we've gathered the information to assess the family's needs, what's next?
The bishop and the Bradleys should pray about the problem, and the Spirit will help them to discern the best solution.
Another source of guidance for the bishop is to seek the counsel of his stake president. By counseling together to make sure that proper principles are being applied, they can help the family discern the will of the Lord.
So far, we discussed 2 options. Make the back payments on the car, or let the car be repossessed. Wouldn't another option be to provide commodities for this family? Then the Bradleys could use their funds to pay on the car.
But how could commodities help? I mean, in this example, there isn't time. The car will be gone.
Is it possible that the bishop would call the creditors to see if they would delay the repossession until the family's able to get their finances in order?
Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints? Yes, I'm calling about a loan that you might carry for Sharon and Mike Bradley.
The bishop can give Mike and Sharon food orders. That would allow them to use their money to pay the debt. That would also allow some time to help the family apply the principles of self-reliance we talked about.
I feel we've overlooked something important. The Leader's Guide to Welfare talks about assisting with necessities. It makes the point that church welfare should sustain life and not lifestyle.
Thank you, President Ortega. We've discussed use commodities rather than cash and assist with necessities. Now, we'll have to take more time in our training to define exactly what necessities are. Are there any other guidelines that we may have overlooked?
What about assigning work for the assistance they receive?
If Mike Bradley were in my ward, I think I'd have him assist other ward members who might have a need. There are always hedges to trim, roofs to mend, or doors to fix.
When administering welfare assistance, use the Needs and Resources Analysis form to study the circumstances. Use the gift of discernment. When possible, provide commodities before cash. Assist with necessities to sustain life and not lifestyle. And assign work opportunities for the assistance received.
Well, brothers and sisters, your suggestions have been very helpful. In a minute, we're going to be summarizing what we've discussed, but for now, would you open your leader's guide to the first page? President J. Reuben Clark gave us a vision of the blessings that can come from providing in the Lord's way. The real long-term objective of the welfare plan is the building of
character in the members of the church, givers and receivers. Rescuing all that is finest deep down inside of them. And bringing to flower and fruitage the latent richness of the Spirit, which, after all, is the mission and purpose and reason for being of this church.